Today we're going to be talking about the distance formula and circles. And I always like to derive the distance formula with my students because I think it's a fun derivation of a formula. So say we have a point x1, y1. We have another point x2, y2. And we're trying to find the distance between those 2 points. Or basically we can think about it as the hypotenuse of this right triangle. So we're going to use our Pythagorean theorem. We're going to use the idea that that's A, that's B, and then our hypotenuse is C. So A squared plus B squared is going to equal C squared. So I'm just going to be looking for C. So I'm going to square root A squared plus B squared to get C. Now let's talk about what A is, how I could find the length of A. How I find the length of A is I find those x-coordinates. I find the difference between those x-coordinates. Typically, we do x2 minus x1. To find this vertical length, we find the distance between the y-coordinates. y2 minus y1. Now, it doesn't matter with those which order you go in. It's just typical that we do x2 minus x1 and y2 minus y1. And so now I plug that into my equation, and we have x squared minus x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And that's the distance between 2 points. And that's our distance formula. And I expect you to memorize that. And I also want you guys to make sure that you know how we got it, because that's important in case you forget. It also helps you remember things. If you remember how you got it, you're going to remember the formula. Our first example, and I have our distance formula there above. Find the distance between those 2 points. So it's just a matter of plugging in. Square root of something squared plus something else squared. And it's the difference of the x values. So -6 minus a -1 and 1 minus 10. So I have -6 plus 1 is 5. -5 squared is 25. 1 minus 10, that's 9. Squared is 81. So I find the square root of 25 plus 81. And that's the square root of 106. I want you to be able to leave that in simplest radical form, which that is, but also type that in your calculator to the nearest tenth to get 10.3. Next, so an application of this. The reason we start doing some applications is we're going to work to proofs involving the coordinate system by the end of the chapter. That's our goal. And we make baby steps to get there. Okay, so given points R, S, and T, find RS, ST, and RT. Are R, S, and T collinear? So if 2 of the segments add up to be the third, then they're going to be collinear. If so, which 2 points lie between the other? Okay, so let's find RS. Square root. I set it up like that. Now RS. You can go either way. I'm going to do 6 minus a -4 and -2 minus a -1. So that's the square root of 10 squared, which is 100. -2 plus 1 is 1 squared, which is 1. So that's the square root of 101. Now do ST. Something squared plus something else squared. Okay, ST. 8 minus a -4 and a -1 minus a -1. Okay, so 8 plus 4 is 12. 12 squared is 144. -1 plus 1 is 0. 0 squared is 0. So I have the square root of 144, which is 12. And then let's find RS. I'm sorry, we already found RS. TS. TS I found. Come on, Marnell, get with the program. RT. RT now is 8 minus 6. And I'm going to do a -1 minus a -2. 8 minus 6, that's 2 squared, so that's 4. -1 plus 2, that's 1 squared is 1, so square root of 5. And I know that the 2 smaller, root 5 plus root 101, does not add up to root 12, or I'm sorry, 212, so these are not collinear. They do not lie on the same line. Okay, equation of a circle now. Now you have to remember this equation of a circle. And it comes actually from the distance formula, because the distance between 2 points is always going to be the same, which is the radius of a circle. So in our equation of our circle, you have x minus h, where h and k are standing for the center of the circle, and the square root of the number that's being added is our radius. So the center, what I often tell my students, it is the opposite of what it looks like. So if it's x minus 3, remember to put it in this form, x minus 3, I don't have to change anything. But if it's plus, we know y minus a -4 gets us into that h and k form. That means our center is 3, -4. So if I need to graph that, I put down the point 3, -4. Now draw out your radius. I go up. The radius is the square root of 25, which is 5. Make sure you square root it. And I'll give you guys a hint. So if you're paying attention and watching the videos and paying attention, you now know the hint. I will always make it so that your circles end up on the grid. So if your circles go off the grid, you know you've done something wrong. The radius is 5. So from our center, I go up 5, down 5, left 5, and right 5. Now draw a circle. Draw a circle as best you can. You're not going to be judged on your drawing circle as long as you have those 4 points. But think about it as doing quarter circles at a time. So start by doing quarter circles at a time. And that is how we draw the circle. Mine always look like an alien head, and I stand back, and that looks like an alien head. Next one, now graph the circle. This one's a little bit more complicated, and always one of Mrs. Marnell's favorite test questions. I guarantee this is going to be on the test. I would almost bet it on my cat's life. I'd bet it on my husband's life, too. I'm getting a little punchy here at the end of the year, guys. Sorry. So please make sure you take notes on this one. Group the like numbers together. So group all the x's together, group the y's together, and subtract that 20 over to the other side. Now you have to complete the square, meaning I rig the problem so that this factors to be a perfect, so that these first 3 terms, when I add a number in there, is a perfect square trinomial. I rig it so that that is also going to be a perfect square trinomial. To complete the square, you take the number in front of the x term, 10. You divide that by 2, and you square it. So simplifying that, 10 divided by 2 is 5, squared is 25. Remember, this is an equation. It has to stay equal. So what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I added 25 to the left side. I have to add 25 to the right side. Now, for the y's, for completing the square, I take the 4, I divide it by 2, and I square it. So simplifying that out. 4 divided by 2 is 2, squared is 4. I didn't worry about the negative because I knew I was squaring in the end. Now make sure what you did to the left side, you do to the right side. So make sure you add 4. I often have students that forget that forget to add, and they end up with a negative radius and they don't know what they did wrong. So I'm trying to help you guys with the common mistakes. Now, factor this. What I always tell my guys, you've rigged the problem. You've made it so that factors to a perfect square. Trinomial. You've rigged the problem. You've rigged the other piece. You've rigged this so that that factors to a perfect square. Now notice that number that's being added is always half of the middle term. Now, simplify what's on the right. Negative 20 plus 25 is 5, plus 4 is 9. So our center is negative 5. 2, our radius, be careful, is the square root of 9. So that's 3. So now we want to graph it. So graphing that, negative 5, positive 2. Now go up 3, down 3, left 3, right 3, and again, try and draw, maybe it will be better if I draw half circles. Step back, still looks like an alien head. You don't have to use your compass. Some people always ask that. Okay, next example. Sketch that region. Notice the difference. I have an inequality. So think about when we were graphing inequalities. Our center is negative 2, 1. Our radius is 3. Now I'm going an inequality. When I'm graphing an inequality, I have to shade. And since I'm not equal to, it's a dashed line. Now I'm looking at all the numbers less than that. So remember, I shade and I shade everything inside. Last example. Write the equation of the circle that has a center and passes through the point. So the center is HK. The point is XY. So now what I want you guys to do is plug into that standard form. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, because I need to find the radius. So it's just a matter of plugging in. So our x is the x point. 4 is our x value. H is a negative 6. Our y value is negative 2. K is a positive 4. Now, it's just a matter of simplifying. 4 plus 6 is 10 squared is 100. Negative 2 minus 4 is a negative 6 squared is 36. So r squared is 136. And that's okay if that doesn't come out to a nice radical. So now I need to make sure I write the equation. So at the end now, you plug in for h, you plug in for k, and you plug in for r squared. R squared is 136. That whole thing. That's why I didn't worry about square rooting, because I needed what r squared was. Now make sure you're putting in h and k. You're not putting in the point that's on the circle. You're putting in the center. Our center was negative 6, 4. So that's plus 6 minus 4. So there at the very top is your equation of your circle. There are your lesson questions for the day. Please make sure those are submitted on time. For number 1, use your calculator and round to the nearest tenth.